Welcome to IC Yap, Young Adults Podcast.
Hey, welcome to Young Adults Podcast, where we will be talking about mental health's grip on young adults. Almost 50% of young adults report suffering with their mental health. We want to open up the room to talk about what it's like for young adults to live through and live happily with a mental health diagnosis. We want to talk to experts, teens, college students, their doctors, and members in our community to get a better understanding of mental health in young adults. Come join us.
Hi, everybody. My name is Claudia.
And I'm Kayla.
And this is the Independent Center Young Adults Podcast, and we're going to be talking about voting today and why it's important for young adults. All right. I wanted to start by recognizing the voting's confusing for everybody, and we'll do our best to clear things up, but we are not experts. Everybody should do their own research when it comes to voting. So we wanted to get a little bit into the history of voting and kind of voter suppression because we thought that was important.
So, women actually first got the right to vote which is part of the 19th Amendment in 1920. I also found out that June 2nd, 1924, 100 years ago, was actually when the Indian Citizenship Act came into place, so indigenous people could vote in America in 1924, 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. In 1870, that's when black voting rights first came to the table. In 1975, the Voting Rights Act was expanded to protect language minorities, so people that spoke a language other than English could also vote. In 1982, Congress required new voting protections for people with disabilities. Truly broad access to American citizenship and voting rights for Asian Americans and Asians wasn't available until Immigration and Nationality Acts of 1952 and 1965 were put in place. And following the 1965 Voting Rights Act, the Chicano movement of the 1960s and 70s, Latinx Americans have been increasingly successful ending discriminatory restrictions on voting rights though many are still in existence.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you look at voting history and how many different kind of things people did to exclude, especially with minority votes, like racial minorities, religious minorities, gender minorities, everything like that. They do things like literacy tests or religious tests. Like if you couldn't answer things about Christianity, then you wouldn't be able to vote.
I mean, if a person was in a wheelchair and their voting place had stairs,
yeah,
that would even suppress.
For sure. Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit, but there is a lot of, it's not perfect, but there's a lot of accommodations and accessibility things that have been added to voting. But even now there's strict voter ID laws. Those are always, I feel like, coming up. Like if you have to have a state ID or it has to be a picture ID. And there's some people, especially in cities, that won't have voter IDs sometimes because you don't need to drive. A lot of people utilize public transport, but you can get just a photo ID.
It's about $15 actually.
Is it?
In St. Louis to get one. I know in my experience, a lot of homeless people, that's something that they really struggle with.
Oh, okay.
And there are actually different programs around St. Louis that can help you get it for free.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to kind of reach out, some of those areas,
awesome.
The St. Patrick Center helps with that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they'll help you get important documents so that you can vote.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it is important to do that early though and be able to kind of have time to register and all that because there's a lot of kind of deadlines to keep track of when it comes to voting.
Yeah, I'm actually registered to vote at the homeless shelter where I was staying before, but now I've moved into housing. But I'm still, because of the deadline, I'm just going to vote at the other place because that's where I'm registered.
Oh, okay. I didn't even think about that. But homeless shelters do allow you to register to vote there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great thing to know.
The next thing we're going to talk about is what rights do I have when it comes to voting. Different constitutional amendments guarantee the right to vote to different minority groups, eliminating poll taxes and lowering voting ages to 18 years old. The Civil Rights Act of 1870 and onwards protected against discrimination and voting. Voting Rights Act of 1965 prohibited voting discrimination based on race, color, or membership in a language minority group. The Voting Accessibility Act of 1984 requires polling places to be accessible to people with disabilities. Guardianship appointed after 2018 could include voting rights. Find this out by looking up your case or talking to your guardian. There are steps that you can take to reinstate this right as well.
Yeah. So guardianships are, I think a lot of times they're case-by-case basis. Like, it's a case-by-case basis whether or not you're able to vote. It kind of just depends. So I would say talk to your guardian, any legal representation you may have. Also, a question came up. We were talking about this at the clubhouse yesterday, about whether or not you can vote if you have a felony, and we looked it up because nobody was really sure. But you can, as long as your probation and parole has ended. If you're still on probation or parole, you are not eligible, or if you had a felony or misdemeanor related to voting, because then that gets into questionable territory. Yeah, but there's a lot of different legislation that's been passed to ensure that people have rights, and I think there's like a hotline you can call if you feel like your voter rights are getting denied to you at the election place.
Yeah, I've seen it on posters and stuff in the past.
Yeah, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but also, if anything comes up while you're voting, like maybe you don't have the right ID or something happens there, you can always request, it's called a provisional ballot. So you still get to cast your vote and everything like that, and election judges will kind of determine whether or not you were like properly registered after like the election ends.
I did not know that.
Yes, very important to know, because so many people have issues with like your registration is at a different address, but I think they look at if your signature matches your like valid ID, like if it matches your ballot from the past, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we're here doing this podcast today is because we believe that it is so important for young adults to vote. Young adults ages 18 to 34 make up over 40 million potential voters, which is almost 1/5 of the American electorate. Today's young voters are the most diverse in history. By 2025, 50% of the 14 to 24-year-olds will be people of color, 11% increase compared to 2 decades ago. 20.8% of Gen Z adults and 10.5% of millennials identify as a sexual and/or gender minority, compared to 4.2% of Gen X and 2.6% of baby boomers. Also, they care more about issues that don't affect them personally.
A lot of things that impact young adults long term too, that are showing up on the ballot, especially in this election. Just supports for mental health, for education, college debt, Social Security, which is farther down the line for young adults, but it's still so important. Policies also take time to actually be put into place. So, like policies that were put in during the previous administration, sometimes you don't actually see the after effects of those until years into the next term, which is super important to recognize.
Another important part is that the Supreme Court seats are appointed for life. These people have the authority to limit the power of executive and legislative branches of government. Multiple seats are said to be up for grabs in this next election term. Make sure your voice is heard and get out there and vote. So, why are you voting?
Yeah, so I have a couple of reasons. I'm not sure there's a ton, like just like one end all be all. But my mom is a teacher, and I've always just thought education is so important and everything like that. And I know education's on the ballot, like especially public school funding. That's where my mom works, at a public school. I went to public school my whole life too, and I think it's really important, especially in America, because like I feel like our literacy rates are not great, and I just think, I don't know where I'm going with this. I don't know.
No, I really agree. I'm studying child advocacy and early childhood education. I used to work in the public school. I went to public school my whole life.
Yeah.
And I'm with the child advocacy aspect of that, just the funds are not being put in the right place.
Yeah, we really need to invest in our future and like the children and make sure we're getting good education, because especially the pandemic kind of ate into that a little bit. There's kids that still are not like functioning at grade level. I think that's a really important one.
I often joke about how like we're not going to retire my generation. It's like we're going to laugh at it, because if we're not laughing at it, we're going to cry.
Yeah, which is also, it's important to vote because Social Security, that's what supports people in retirement. And investing into that, and a candidate that is like passionate about putting money into that fund is really important. I also have a lot of reproductive health issues, and I kind of rely on that health care just personally to live a life that is like not painful and miserable and everything. And I think people forget about that a lot. There's a whole bunch of reasons why healthcare is important. That's just one of them. But
So one of the ways that I actually became educated about voting was in high school. I actually took a government and politics class. Shout out to Dr. Schmidt. I think she works at McKinley now.
mm-hmm.
But I learned so much in that class. It was AP is like when you take like a college course in high school. So yeah,
Yes.
I did that, and it was super cool, and I learned so much about voting and everything. And then the next year, I actually got to vote for the first time after that. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, learning how the government works is such like, it's so complicated, but it really does help kind of understand.
It was a really fun class, and yeah, we just learned so much about how the different houses work and all the different things, because there's a lot that goes into voting.
Yeah, there is. Even like doing the research for this podcast, like there's so much information. Like governmental websites have so much information about like how to vote, how to make a voting plan, where you can vote, when, just all of that. And I didn't really know a ton of it until looking it up. It's important to like use multiple sources and all that stuff. Don't blindly follow anybody's views. Go out and research and construct your own, something that you really believe in. That is really important, and that is what will take us into the future.
Yeah, I know in Missouri, the polls are opening at 6 a.m. and they're staying open until 7 p.m. And if you are in line at 7 p.m., you are still able to vote.
Yes.
So you've got to be in that line to vote by 7 p.m. in Missouri.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, super important. There's also early voting going on right now, at least in Missouri. Mail-in voters, those are already past deadlines for that to register for it, I'm pretty sure. But you can go in person to a bunch of libraries in the city and the county of St. Louis, and there's early voting at all those places, which is awesome.
Yeah, I've seen that they're expecting a lot of people to do early voting this time around.
Mm-hmm. Which, yeah, it's like, why would you not? Like, skip, I know there's still lines, but I've just heard lines on, like, actual presidential election day is crazy. The only other election I voted in was 2020, and I did a mail-in ballot for that, so I've never been, like, to, like, a polling place on an actual election day, but nobody likes lines.
So again, with almost 40 million potential voters, us young adults really need to get out there and vote.
Yeah, if we all show up in huge numbers, we can make a huge impact and really fight for what we believe in and make sure we're getting candidates into office that have our best interest in mind. Make sure you do your own research. The internet has a ton of great resources. Watch the debates, all that good stuff. And just make sure you're voting in the way that you want to. Nobody knows how you vote, so